League has a long history of incredibly overpowered items, way too many to cover in one single video. So this video is going to look at one specific item and the absolutely catastrophic effect it had on League. This item was so busted that it is famously credited for single-handedly ruining a Worlds tournament. It defined the meta both in solo queue and in competitive, and is regarded as one of the worst in League's history. This item was so ridiculously overtuned that the top priority of every team was to stack gold on their support as fast as possible, the complete opposite of how the role is designed to operate. Not only that, it was so important to get this item that AD carry players would start with the support item to funnel gold to the support. Anyone who played League in 2017 is already breaking into a cold sweat just at the thought of this meta. This is the story of how Ardent Censer, one of the most broken items in League history, created one of the worst metas in League history, and how Riot let it happen.
We do get Ardent Censer here from RNG. The race for completing Ardent Censer. Ardent Censer support.
Rushing Ardent Censer on the support.
You said the magic word, Papa Smithy. Non-interactive, and the Janna is locked in.
Ardent Censer was originally added in Season 4, and you might think that this is the season where all of this happened. It is not. The item was pretty unpopular. In Season 4, it only granted attack speed to the ally that you had buffed. The version that existed for Worlds 2017 granted allies attack speed, on-hit damage, and on-hit healing. Before we talk more about the impact this had on solo queue and on competitive, you need to understand the math behind this item. To begin with, the actual stats from the item itself had a value of about 2,100 gold. The item actually cost 2,300 gold. This seems pretty reasonable, but you were building it for the effects that it gave your allies, not the stats that it gave you. These effects are not included in the 2,100 gold amount. The 25% attack speed it granted and the 25 on-hit damage it granted each provided your ally with 625 gold of stats, and that's completely ignoring the on-hit healing of 25 per hit. The math is a little trickier here, but at level 8 your AD carry would have around 150 attack damage. Healing for 25 per hit is about the same as having 17% lifesteal at this point, which is around 630 gold value. The AD carry is actually getting about 1,880 gold of bonus stats just from Ardent Censer's buffs. This means that Ardent Censer provided about 3,980 gold of stats total for the 2,300 gold you spent on it. Keep in mind, these effects could be applied to many champions at once. If Soraka or Janna use their ult, they could generate over 7,000 gold of stats to their team, not including the value from the ability that is actually applying the Ardent Censer effect. And all of this math is completely ignoring the 10% bonus healing and shielding also attached to the item. I want to be clear here. If Janna clicked E on a carry a single time, they would receive the following: a 240 health shield increased by Windspeaker's Blessing and increased again by Ardent Censer, 40 AD from her E, 25% attack speed from Ardent, 25 damage on hit from Ardent, 25 on hit heal from Ardent, bonus armor and magic resist from Windspeaker's Blessing. All of this combined means that Janna would be granting over 4,000 gold of stats to an ally every time she pressed E, as long as she had Ardent Censer. And that's not even a late game example, that is Janna on one item. Janna with Ardent Censer would be giving her carry the equivalent of a full BF sword, almost 2 recurve bows, the lifesteal portion of 2.5 vampiric scepters, and the equivalent health of basically 2 ruby crystals. Imagine how frustrating it would be to play as an AD carry in solo queue whose support is not building Ardent Censer while the enemy is. Once their power spike is complete, there's really no way you could hope to overcome the raw stat advantage that it would grant. They would just stat check you because of a point and click shield, and there was really nothing you could do about it. No matter which forum you go on, you can find plenty of posts from people discussing how strong Ardent Censer was at this point. Even pro players were calling it out as a problem. It was very well known that Ardent Censer was way too strong at this point. It is true that players can sometimes exaggerate the overall strength of something, so I went out of my way to look at the historical win rates and ban rates. We're going to play a game, and I have a suspicion that you're going to have a very easy time with it. This chart on the screen shows Janna's win rate history with the ears blurred. Can you guess where on this chart corresponds to the Ardent Censer meta? Give yourself a pat on the back. It wasn't too hard, was it? If you get it wrong, don't worry. There's a part 2 so you can try again. This one is even a bit easier. This chart on the screen shows Janna's historical ban rate. Can you guess where on this chart corresponds to the Ardent Censer meta? You might think that this peak must have been exactly at the same time as Worlds, or else Riot would see something was up and maybe make some adjustments ahead of time, right? Well, the peak was actually in August, over a month before Worlds started, and even then her win rate had been ramping up since July. This means that there were months of stats to pull from before Worlds, but Ardent Censer was still not nerfed, and this trend can be seen with other enchanters too. It is definitely not Janna specific. But there were no nerfs leading up to Worlds 2017. Speaking of Worlds 2017, the first 12 games of the tournament would see Ardent Censer built 24 times.
He's got an Ardent Censer for perks to help his attack speed.
There's Ardent Censer from the Iron, but so many tanks and Ardent Censer 80 carries.
Trying to get that Ardent Censer in there.
It wasn't just built in every game, it was built on each team in every game. Right from the start, the meta was apparent, and this little lamp item would become the focal point of the tournament. Players following the pro scene were not happy with this meta. It led to a very dull viewing experience because of how it warped the entire game and all lanes around bot lane. Many pro players really disliked this meta because it reduced the other roles to being background characters for the bot laners, and didn't give the others much time to shine. SKT Teddy said, "The worst meta ever was Ardent Censer. It's a radical meta where the performance on other lanes does not matter." I mentioned that the first 12 matches saw Ardent Censer built 24 times. Well, in those 12 matches, almost every single matchup in the top lane was double tank top lane, and this trend would continue throughout the entire tournament. If you look at the overall stats for the main event, the top 12 champions overall for presence were all either an AD carry, a tank, or a supportive champion. Even in mid lane, Galio had the overall highest presence. Cho'Gath, Maokai, and Shen were the three big picks for top lane. Mid lane had Ryze, Syndra, and Galio. It's worth noting here that the mid laners with the highest win rate and over 10 games played were champions that could support their AD carry in fights. Galio had a 91% presence and a 67% win rate. Malzahar had a 21% presence but a 90% win rate, winning 9 out of 10 games where he was played. In the support role, Ardent Censer itself was really the main character. The main vessels for Ardent were Janna and Lulu, and Janna would have a 70% win rate over 44 matches and a 95% presence overall. Lulu's presence was right next to hers at 93.8. It has to be mentioned here that Kalista was the best AD carry at this point. Hands down, no questions asked. Any AD carry was very strong with Ardent, but Kalista was insanely strong to begin with. At the main event for Worlds, there was not one single game where Kalista made it through the ban phase. She maintained a 100% ban rate for the full main event. Everything about the meta had warped around Ardent Censer. That much was clear. But it wasn't quite that simple. It was so important to get this item as soon as he possibly could that supports began running gold generation runes just for this purpose. ADCs would start the match with the Relic Shield item so they could share their gold with the support. There was also another factor here. It gave a permanent shield that regenerated while out of combat. This made ADCs even more durable, contributing further to the play around the ADC meta. The support would start with Ancient Coin, with the purpose of generating gold as fast as possible to build Ardent Censer. It generated a lot of gold basically for free. Its impact on the meta wasn't quite as strong as Ardent Censer, but that's not saying much as Ardent Censer was so strong it warped the game around it. Before discussing the rest of the tournament, we need to stop for a second. What actually caused this tournament to play out like this? How could Riot have not seen this coming? Freak even talked about the situation in a patch note video in July 2017, over 2 months before Worlds.
You have not realized how good Ancient Coin is. That item gives you so much gold, it's insane. The Ancient Coin line is so good. It's honestly incredibly, stupidly strong after the gold buffs in 7.13. I saw someone in chat earlier say, lol, coin sucks, and that dude is not good at League of Legends. So I think coin actually needs to be nerfed. Now that the rewards feel good in terms of like picking up the coins because they're so powerful, honestly, it probably should have had a weaker quest reward. And so it has another sort of semi-passive quest reward, which is your teammates, basically you get a Janna passive. Anyway, I think this actually nerfs Ancient Coin line. I would generally say the Potion of Skill. Well, the Potion of Skill feels more visceral, so I assume people are going to call it a nerf. I'd be curious to see actual win rate data and see if Janna or whoever else gets stronger with coin before or after the patch, because I'm actually uncertain. If anyone really cares, they can like go to like Lawalytics and like look at the Ancient Coin win rate versus Spellthief's win rate.
These clips were from July, and Freak was already mentioning that he felt nerfs were needed and referenced win rates directly. If you've been paying attention, then you probably realize this was before Janna's win rate actually peaked in August. So Riot had plenty of information ahead of time that enchanters were overperforming due to Ancient Coin and Ardent Censer, and the problem had only gotten worse between then and Worlds. Why is it then that the tournament had been allowed to play out like this? Why were there no nerfs ahead of time? Well, it's true that solo queue win rate doesn't always correlate with pro play. While the Ardent meta was clearly dominated in solo queue, how was it performing in pro play leading up to Worlds? Well, the LCK Spring Promotion had finished 1 week before Worlds, and these were the results. Janna was picked 9 times and won 8 of those games. She was the most picked and contested support. This is obviously a red flag, but it was also about 1 week before Worlds started. If you look at everything before then, the meta had not quite been identified. Braum, Alistar, and Thresh were the most picked at most events, and it really wasn't close. With that said, there was actually a match that was played on August 12th that had basically everything we would see at Worlds. It was Game 1 of the LCK Summer Playoffs, SKT versus AFS. Janna started with Ancient Coin and also ran Gold Generation, Seals, and Quints. This wasn't the first time this was seen. Mata had also done this, for example, but it was becoming more and more common. This game, though, did see Twitch start with Relic Shield, which was new to this meta. So much so that even the casters missed it for the first few minutes.
We should mention something here. Kramer's running Relic Shield Twitch.
You are correct.
So the theory here is that we're seeing gold Seals be run by Tucson, gold Quints, and actually the last hits from Kramer will also pass gold over to the Janna. So what the reasoning is here is you want to rush the Ardent Censer as fast as possible, and to the nth degree, even Kramer is trying to rush the Ardent Censer for the Janna because he's actually opted into sharing gold as an AD carry. This hasn't been seen since Relic Shield was released, and you remember was very powerful on release. Yes. So pre-season, a lot of bot lanes were going double Relic Shield, upgrading to Targons and abusing that. Those days are gone, but with how powerful as a one-item spike Ardent Censer is on Janna, it really does feel good as Twitch. You're basically a god the moment that item is completed. Kramer is extra investing. This is really innovative from the side of Afrika. And I love that they're throwing this in as a gambit.
We wanted new champions, didn't quite get it. The Janna, I guess, kind of coming back in. Same with the Lulu being brought out by Wolf. Those are the odd ones. But making up for it with the item build there by Kramer. I'd like to see how much gold this is, of a difference this is creating between the likes of Wolf and Tucson as he takes quite a bit of damage.
Feels like also the Spellthief's edge is outclassed by the Ancient Coin route with how much gold generation there is now if you can actually pick up the gold, and here we go. It's already 700-ish gold between the coin and also the Twitch.
AFS actually lost that match, and both Janna and Lulu were not picked again for the rest of the playoffs. Interestingly, because the strategy was new at the time, there was a lot of feedback from the community. Even if it had been played more, I think it's unlikely that Riot would have actually nerfed it because of the Worlds 2015 incident. See, 2 years earlier, Riot released the Juggernaut update that reworked a bunch of champions, just over 1 month before the start of Worlds. Notably, Mordekaiser and Gangplank were both played in 4 games and won all of them. The reason that number isn't higher is because for every other game in the tournament, they were banned. Gangplank had a 100% pick or ban rate, while Mordekaiser had a 99% pick or ban rate. There was 1 single game where he wasn't picked or banned. The most picked top laner of the event, Darius, was also part of this update. I won't go into this any further now, because honestly there's too much to dive into here, and it really deserves its own video. Spoiler, I'm already working on that video. This does give some context as to why Riot was so scared to make balance changes so close to Worlds 2017. All the signs were there that this was going to be a problem. The community had even pointed it out, and Freak said it himself. But by the time Ardent Censer could no longer be ignored, Worlds was basically starting. And this was the Worlds 2017 viewing experience.
And now I want to see if RNG wants to play Ardent Censer better, because Lulu, Janna are super popular here among the pro teams. go for late game and just rely on your AD carry to win the games is something we will see very often. We do get Ardent Censer here from RNG.
Well, I'm becoming incredibly familiar with gold generation in the bottom lane. Once again, we have double Targon AD carries, double coin supports, and I'm just going to assume that they've got gold generation runes as well on those supports to really fund the Ardent Censers.
And now as well, feels like we're set up for that passive back and forth farming bottom lane.
If you watch those clips, then you don't really have to watch any of the actual games because that was pretty much it. When a champion gets locked in and the casters say the name of the item that the champion is going to build instead of the actual champion's name, you know something is wrong. And also, from a viewer perspective, it isn't particularly interesting to watch two bot lanes refuse to interact in any way, especially when the rest of the team is also probably drafted around that bot lane and just waiting for their bot lane to come online. The most exciting game of the tournament was of course the last series, specifically the third match, SKT versus Samsung Galaxy. SKT locked in Leona in an attempt to counter Lulu.
And it will be the Leona backs against the wall. Wolf learning from Ignar.
If you're giving over Lulu here, it's because you're ready to try and play something that can kill the Lulu.
Now, you might be thinking that this is a cool innovation, a way to finally get away from Ardent Censer. Well, unfortunately not. You could pick a support that wasn't going to build Ardent Censer, as long as someone else was going to build it.
People had problems with Faker on Galio, then they're definitely not going to like the elimination match of putting Faker onto Karma, but you can see how much faith they have in that team play and how important that Censer is in the meta currently.
And it's so crazy that the best performing player during this tournament, the best player in the world, is being put on a supportive champion for this big game here. SKT have relied so much on Faker being so strong in so many games, and now it's not about Faker specifically, it's about Huni on Trundle and Bang and Wolf in the bottom lane.
Samsung have shown them the way to win as a team. Faker's bought in, now it's up to the team.
SKT had a 5-kill and almost 3,000 gold lead in 12 minutes, but just 3 minutes later, their lead had shrunk all the way down to 1,000. At 24 minutes, they had a 7,000 gold lead, and you're probably thinking that that game must have been over. It was not. SKT ended up losing their lead, and Samsung Galaxy was actually slightly ahead. This led to a standoff in mid over Baron 36 minutes into the game. The game would end in a way that perfectly represented the Ardent Censer meta. Ruler flashed in on Faker, landed ult, and well, see for yourself.
They've got the CC! The mid laner is down! The unkillable Demon King has done just alive! As Ruler stays in, life-stealing!
This was the first time SKT had lost a World Championship match, and Samsung Galaxy became the 2017 World Champions. At this point, Ardent Censer had already been nerfed in solo queue. The nerfs actually went live 4 days into Worlds. They completely removed the on-hit healing and made Ardent Censer's other effects scale instead of being a flat percent. It started weaker than it was and scaled to be stronger. The same patch added 8 seconds to Janna's E at rank 1, but also buffed other parts of her kit. Freak talked about the nerf in his patch 7.19 rundown video.
If you were just getting 25 life back on hit, you got a Bloodthirster worth of regen. And keep in mind, like, you got 25 attack damage too and 25 attack speed. Like, this was the single best part of the item. So even though the scaling comes back in and, now it's, all kinds of wonderful and fun and stuff like that, you can have 35 attack speed and whatever else because it scales with the target level, and no longer heals you an insane amount.
Surely this was enough to balance the item, right? Well, of course not. Less than 1 month after the first nerf, Riot released a second round of nerfs. Even after removing the on-hit healing completely, the item was still just way too strong. The second patch cut the starting strength of its attack speed buff by half, and it cut the starting strength of the on-hit damage by 75%, making it scale further instead. It's worth noting that both of these nerfs happened while Worlds was still ongoing, so just imagine how strong the version of the item was that was actually played in Worlds. I do understand why Riot were hesitant to make changes before the tournament. They were scared of repeating Worlds 2015. That said, there is a huge difference between completely reworking a bunch of champions all at once and slightly nerfing a couple of items. I'm curious, what do you think about all this? Did you play back then, and what did you think about Ardent Censer? If you didn't play, and this is the first time learning all this, what are your thoughts? Should Riot have risked shaking up the meta right before Worlds for the sake of avoiding a situation like this? Or did they do the right thing by playing it safe and letting it unfold, even when they knew that it was a potential problem? Honestly, I'm surprised that the Victorious skin for the season wasn't just a new icon for Ardent Censer, because it really would have been fitting. The official league page even updated their icon to be Ardent Censer. Let me know what you think down below, and again, thanks for watching.
So good.